welcome back to yet another Dry Sales Show episode. Appreciate everybody. This time I have an awesome guest, like all other guests, obviously. But this specific guest, he is a VP of sales at Mesa Moving, Jason Beek. My man, thank you very much for joining us on such a short notice, by the way. Appreciate it.
Sure. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So for everybody who's tuning in, Mesa Moving is a company which has superb reputation in terms of service delivery and in terms of standing within the van line. So I would love for Jason to talk to us about a bit about the service level. What is it that you guys do differently potentially to others, and some of the intricacies that you guys pay attention to get that reputation that Mesa has.
Perfect. Thank you. So we are a agent for United Van Lines. So when we have interstate and international travel clients that are moving, that is who we utilize. We are located in 4 states. We have 7 operations in Colorado, Idaho, Utah, and Rocky Mountain region of the United States. We focus on a 5-star experience. So from the starting point when clients hit our calls, our websites, we have a sales team, basically gatekeepers, if you will. Then it filters through to sales, service, operations. Everybody in the process is pushed to have a 5-star experience for the customer, so that when the customer has a completed move, they've had professionals along the way. They've had people that are accountable, that are prompt, that answer their questions, provide solutions. And so that's really where we focus. We try to provide premier service, not just cover the idea that we try to find the right clients and service properly, to provide solutions on what those needs are.
And look, I know that you guys are doing a great job, and you're also a very tech forward in terms of utilizing different systems and whatnot. So, I'm very happy to have you here. And I actually want to talk, as your VP of sales in the moving industry, especially for a big agent in United Van Lines. Can you please tell me what you generally deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll get into further in terms of operational stuff and trying to grow the revenue.
Sure. So the business, if we look at the mix of business that we do, about 60%, 65% of it is household goods. The other is non. So that is in regards to companies that are relocating. Office and industrial is the term that is used. Warehousing, logistics, those combined terms cover the additional 35% of our revenue. So our branches, our locations have a variety of business. Some of the branches, depending on which location we're talking, are very skewed, very heavy into the household goods side. Other ones are a very good mix of household and then non-household, the commercial side. So depending on which branch we're talking about is really type of business we're looking at. So we really have operation, one entity name known as Mesa. And then you have 7 branches that are kind of their own individual color. They're their own team. When we look at the bigger branches, for instance, in Denver and Salt Lake, they can have anywhere from 10 to 15 deliveries for commercial freight a day. They can have 40 to 50 jobs on their books a day. So that becomes a very large operation, 100, 150 people, crew members that are in those locations that are doing jobs daily. So it is a very large scale operation. You get into some of the smaller markets we have, they may have 15 people, 10 people. They may have 4 jobs on the books for the day. So it's the same type of business, just at a different scale. Where it comes into play is United becomes our for clients that are coming in and out of our markets. It allows us the ability to have 500 plus locations throughout the United States. So when the clients that we contract with move out of the states in the locations where we reside, we have support on the destination side to get them storage, to get them qualified labor, to basically help them get delivered and placed. With our accounts, with our national accounts and our large larger corporate relationships, we have customers that we service that originate not in our market, come to our market. So we have clients that may be coming from California. We are able then to use those networks, relationships that we've established, that we can provide solutions for our clients, even when it's out of markets where we have assets. So in this case, we've been lucky in the last 2 years. A lot of the agents in our network have seen unprecedented, so basically excessive demands. So it's given us an opportunity to say yes to a lot of business, but then it makes it the challenge that resources become limited. So it is easy to get business. It is hard to service the business. So it has made a different challenge in the last year, particularly compared to what was historic, where the challenges in the past were trying to find the right business. Now, selecting the right type of business and ensure your network is secure so that clients can have a successful story. It's been a change. That's a lot of, but it's that same challenge in every market. Some markets are just small with unique needs, and then other ones are big, like Salt Lake major metropolitan, have large volumes of demand. So you see that challenge scaled out.
And then, thank you for walking us through how that looks. So a couple of things. As you now have to turn down specifically business to get the business that is the right fit for you guys, what are some of the things that you look for to make that distinction between what is a good fit and what is not a good fit in terms of specific moves? Because you said there's enough demand, the supply, and the service thing have to cope with how much demand there is currently.
Sure. So it starts it starts with assessing what your operational capacity is. So you have to keep a very good pulse on availability to service, dates that are open, dates where you have crews, packers, drivers, warehouse facilities, all of the we look at a contract, for instance. A customer would need help packing their contents into boxes. So that's packing services. You have the crew that needs to help a driver. You then need the driver. You also need the trucks. You need the side. So if you look at that, there's 5 components to create a successful move. Well, that's great, but what if you don't have packers? What if the day you need to load or pack on July 1st, your pack crew is full? There's no ability. You can't pack the customer. If you can't pack the customer, you can't get their stuff up. So you need more than one resource available. So it starts with understanding your capacities and your availabilities to say yes. So that is where we start, because our inside sales team, their job is to vet clients, is to confirm needs, to make sure it's a qualified candidate, or in this case, customer. In the storyline, they also need to make sure that the customer's needs, date needs, scope of service needs, can be serviced. So for a sales rep, actually, sales questionnaire, if you will, in assessing needs and determining a contract and a price, we need to make sure that we could even serve. This part is vetting on the front side to make sure what we do to our sales machine, we can service. There's a little gray area because there are times where you have maybes. You have clients that may have flexibility on dates. You may have a few openings in your branches to possibly squeeze in an extra move. So there's always that spillover where you want a little extra, you want a little more demand than you have availability, so you can hopefully fill your books with good business. It's tricky because there are situations where customers' closings fall through, their move dates change, obligations, family, work commitments, all of those things can change last minute. So it can take a booked move and pull it off of your schedule. So now you have an available date last minute. That happens. So it's really with I think team mentality is the importance lies in the team that communicates both their opportunities, but then their capacities to be able to service something. So you can be efficient. You can work together to try to say yes to as much as possible. Then it's on sales. It's on sales not just to quote something and earn the business, but it's on sales to find the best business and the that aligns with the company's service model. We have a service model and a quality score that we focus on, and it's a type of client that matches that model, so that we are a good pair and we work well together. The customer's needs are serviced, price points match, everything is so our job is to then look for the clients that have a price point that aligns with. If we do that well, both parties feel like a partnership. And so that's where sales, I look at it more consultants. They're not sales reps. They're just to cover needs, but to find clients that are the right fit for what we can provide. So that's the kind of the long answer to it, of saying that, it's really trying to build a good relationship with both company and customer.
Yeah, and that's a great answer. And now from that answer, I have a couple of things I want to get into. So from my understanding, well, as a layman standing outside of the organization, is the biggest heroes or the biggest villains in terms of getting the qualified opportunities is the inside sales team slash the gatekeepers, however you want to phrase it currently. So, would you be able to share some light in how that team actually does it effectively? Because they're on the phone all the time. So, is there specific questions that they ask? I mean, we talked about if they have packing and they have availability, but finding that fit between company and client, is there something specific that you've worked with that team to ask to find that perfect match?
Sure. So there are foundational things when we talk of it. Most importantly is date. Is the date for service. That is the first most important determining factor, particularly in the summer seasons, our peak seasons. If we can even service them, then it's worth spending time talking further. Past that, then the next foundational questions become size of move and what type of move. So you can have a local within town, you can have an intrastate within the state, or you can have an interstate going somewhere across the United States. That can dictate capacity as well. Because example, we could have opportunity to service in the market we're in. If we set example Denver, we may have a crew in a truck that can do a local job, but we may not have an interstate driver available to move somebody out of state. So it goes back to that conversation of capacities and looking at all types of capacities, not just the idea, well, we say we're full. Well, we're full for what? Are we full for all services or capacities for just certain services? So we have to ask the questions to the, again, starting with move date and then move type. And then what services are needed, from packing to storage to the actual labor to move things. There can be flexibility on dates. There can be flexibility on services that make a no or a maybe and become a yes, we can help the customer. So is the foundational questions to vet. The inside sales team, we have a mix of some are actual sales reps, have been and still are, so that they actually do sales quotes daily, weekly. So they know the sales dance, they know the process, they know what it looks like. They are living and breathing the challenges that the actual outside sales teams experience. So they are very qualified to catch that on the front side. Have another one that we put in as a gatekeeper just to catch phones, because sometimes those sales calls can take time. Non-sales related person that can focus efficiently on answering calls, qualifying, partitioning off. About 30+% of what we get on the call team is not sales related. It's my driver, I need my coordinator, trying to get hold of this branch. It's over for interest, and they've called our number, which is perfect. We want them to be received by a person. We want them to be answered and filtered to where they need to go to and passed off. So that's really, I think, foundationally, it's going back to, you don't need to do anything fancy. If you keep the foundational basics, you keep a good, clean opportunity pipeline. Again, going back to the question becomes the gray area of how much you put into sales to be supply and demand. And so example to say, if I had customers, would I allow them to talk to a salesperson. Or I say, hey, based on capacities, I have enough for 5. Maybe I whittle it down to 5 or 6, pre-screen tighter. I just tighten up my qualifying on the front side with dates and move information. If I just want the sales team to vet all of it, they keep it broad and say, look, get as much as you team and let them qualify their business. So we make adjustments. We do it weekly. As I look at metrics and analytics, I determine how much volume I want my team to see, because I want them focused on sales, and I want them, if they're not focused on inbound, I want them out hunting and growing their own networks, because it's a blend. You have a blend of self-generated opportunities and inquiries that come in from websites, Mesa brand, United brand. Our reputations, will generate opportunities as well. So if that answers your question.
So it does answer it. And then I actually want to actually poke something that you just mentioned. I'm very curious, as generally when I talk to other moving companies, analytics and metrics are not always talked about. So I'm curious to hear, what are the metrics and analytics that you generally look at to make those decisions to optimize for capacity and for your team, depending on week. I'm just curious.
Sure. So lots of different systems. Our industry loves to have systems for systems. If you look at a customer's experience, their move could touch up to 5 operating or software systems. We've talked about that in our own meetings together, where, kind of the stick in the spoke for efficiencies in our industry is the fact that, one system quotes, one system does the CRM, one system does the operation stuff, a different system does accounting. It can happen that way. So you can have multiple systems to create the paperwork process for a customer's move. So analytic wise, on the front side, that inside sales team, we capture reports of how much activity they do a week, what sources their activities come. So when a customer comes in and says, hey, I'm interested, I'd like to talk to you about covering my move, one of those qualifying questions is, how did you find us? So we can qualify where the lead came from, where the opportunity was generated from. Once that is created on the front side, we have basically a statistic of how much activity we had for that week. In there, we can see which channels of lead sources had certain counts. So we track it weekly. We have a quarterly, a yearly total for those numbers. We then also apply that for sales. So we then also, that sales team is not only looking at lead source, but then who gets that lead that came through. So we then can track, of say 13 sales reps, who has how much activity per week of inbound, what we assigned to you. That's on the front side. On the sales process, use a CRM. So we use HubSpot program that we utilize for our company. It does pair with some of our other software programs and provide information, works marketing campaigns. So we do utilize HubSpot. With that gives us information on a sales pipeline. It is manual. There's not enough integration between other software systems that allow it to extract data heavily. Partially it does, but not in a very large sense. So what we do is we take that qualified opportunity, we create deals or estimates, quotes, if you will, that we can track. So we find looks like what we're quoting. Through there, I have about 30 reports I've built that I look at almost daily that show me who's selling, what they're selling, what revenue amount, what margin amounts, what types. It basically gives me a very strong, the term dashboard, that I can look at it and see how my team and individuals are selling. I can apply that next to the leads to figure out, all right, here's how we're doing if I just look at the two comparatively. As we go further down into that, there are 2 other software programs that, as we use in that process, that run full reports, that I don't have to look at charts. I can take all the numbers of what was quoted, what was closed, what numbers came out of those quotes. So I can look at percentages. I can look at percentages of example. If I talk to 100 customers, how many did I quote? Of those, how many did I quote? How many did I book? can look at the margins, I can look at the order counts, I can compare it year over year. So I can look at a day number, a week number, a month number, an annual number to compare how we're looking year over year. I usually look at a 2-year window. Going back much further, it doesn't do much service to look at historically much past 2 years, because as you grow and scale and markets change and industries change, a 2-year window gives you a comparison. Not that I don't look further back, just I don't manage day to day much past a 2-year window in comparisons. So that really gives me, I'm not exaggerating, probably about 40 plus reports that you can look at. Depending on what I'm managing is what I'm looking at is a historical trend. But it runs by the numbers, that way you can make intelligent strategic decisions versus the old school, how I feel, how I think, you make a decision, and then you can watch how you turn levers, how it impacts the revenues and the margins, and it impacts the business. So,
Look, that utilizing HubSpot is great, and then other systems that build out the dashboard, so to speak, for you and for the different reports. I think it's phenomenal because decisions have to be made based on data, not, as you said, how I feel. I'll give you an example. I talked to a friend of mine who is in sales, and he does in-home surveys. He's also in the industry, right? I chatted with him last week, and he told me I close about 98% of every home I get into. I mean,
okay,
98% of the, that's yeah, when he told me, like, look, are you sure, or that's how you feel? Like, I feel like I closed 98. Like, how many of those deals you just brush off on the side? Like, it's not a good fit for us. Oh, we couldn't service it, and you just don't
sure,
count in what you think is the 98%. Because if you close at 98%,
sure.
you're an absolute beast. So, but anyways,
Absolutely. Well, it depends on, when you're looking at that, that's a statistic of saying, going back to the 100%. If we had 100 clients that called or emailed us or chatted, you would have anywhere from 20 to 30 of those aren't sales related and or aren't within your wheelhouse of even an appropriate fit for service model. So just say, for instance, that means 70 are qualified to talk further in a sales process. So you're now looking at 70 you could possibly quote. Of 70, how many do you get to quote? Maybe 50. So that means 50 out of 100, only half of the people you could talk to that are already interested in reaching out to you, do you even get a chance to quote? Of the 50, how many do you close? And if you say 25, that means you've quoted 50% of, you've closed 50% of what you quoted. But on the broad number, your close ratio is 25% on the broad aggregate of what comes across your plate. So
yeah.
yeah, you can look at stats anywhere you want. And that's where I look at ultimately the volume in, and then the output on the backside. The stuff in between is the efficiency of the team, which is important. And that's where we massage that to make it better. But ultimately, let's be honest, it's the back end of what you book and what you make on it is really the result. That's what people see, and that's what people concern with. The other stuff is how you manage. So,
No, I completely agree, and the reason why I'm saying is, like, some of the companies give like different numbers, but since you're so deep into analytics, I'm not sure if this is too much for me to ask, but I'm curious if you could share. If not, it's also okay. What is, for your outside sales reps, what is the expected close ratio of the quotes that they send out for them to close? What do you expect to be like in good standing, so to speak, in terms of, yeah, closing? If you can share. If not, it's
sure.
completely okay.
Well, it depends on, going back to that lead source. When you look at it, if we have 18 different categories of where leads come from or are generated from. Example, you look at what may come in from our website, just from the fact that we have a www.mesamoving.com website. That allows people to find us by Google search and then get in and put in a move request. They want to quote. We could look at that channel, for instance, and say, all right, of 100 customers that come in, that have inquiries, we book 30 clients out of that. Great. 30% is the close ratio. But then when we have sales reps that generate their own or have referrals or have repeat business, network business, they close it at 8%. So of 100 clients they talk to, they pull out 85 deals. So when you look at that number, it depends on which channel we talk of. When we look at the average, and you take all of those 18 channels and put them together, you're about a 35 close ratio for the activity. It's not saying taking 100 and the 30 I couldn't quote, I don't peel that off and say, well, I could only talk to 70, so I'm only caring about the 70. I book 35 of 70. I don't consider it, I book 50% of my opportunities. I look at it as the traffic in, because that's what I can start to flag with marketing efforts is traffic, overall traffic. And then the back end is how much activity. So historically, as I've looked in the industry, the lead sources, depending, average between 20 to 35% close ratio is your number. It just depends on which type of lead source we're looking at. So that's where I look at it. I don't hold it to bear. Ultimately, the sales team, they don't have a close ratio number. They have a revenue number. Their goal is to sell at a certain amount, a scale of business, to support their role and to support their branch. They have to have a certain volume of activity in order to be at a volume they need. And that's what we look at. There's price points, there's margins that all tie into that. They have to make profitable business.
I love it. No, like Jason, I absolutely love it, because obviously based on different lead sources, if you look at lead generators, basically like, companies like moving.com and whatever else that you're looking at, right? They will close differently than a referral business or someone that goes to mesamoving.com to get a quote. Completely different ball game. But it's super exciting to hear that you like how specific you are with all the numbers about the company. I personally love hearing it, because generally it's not necessarily the case that it's someone is that numbers driven in terms of figuring out different lead sources and where they are in the stage process specifically and how they close and all that stuff.
Sure.
So next thing, since your sales reps, let's say they close from 20 to 35% on average when you aggregate all the leads or all the activity that came in, and now you have those sales reps. This is something I don't know, have you in the last, let's say, year and a half, you brought in new sales reps to the team, outside salespeople? Have you? I don't necessarily know.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Follow-up question is, what were some of the interview questions that you've asked those people, or one that is your go-to question to make a decision on someone who you're going with versus someone who you're not going with to take on the role at Mesa Moving? If you can share, I'll give you a couple of mine, but anyway.
It's funny. I'm not a script person. I like things to be organic. For candidates, when I talk to them, I look at the resume as a reference point of interest. Past that, it's a follow-up or starting point of, what's your history and what got you to here. Let them kind of talk of the things they think are important and the things that matter into their career and depicting who they are and what they can offer. The change in the industry. I've been in the industry since 2002. Our industry is antiquated in many components. I mean, it wasn't till 2011 to 2014, depending where we're talking, that things started to digitize. A lot of the processes were very pen and paper. I mean, even quotes back then were still, you walk into a customer with a pen and paper, and that's how you started the foundation of your estimate. You used a quoting technology or tool at some degree to create a digital quote, but you didn't do it in the house. You went back to it later. And so when I look at what has changed, one of the things that's important is now the salesperson has to be able to be proficient or comfortable with using technology. So that is one thing that I am very apt on in asking of, not are they experts, but how do they learn and how do they use technology? Because, you look at your devices. If you ever switch from an Android to an iPhone, they're still smartphones, but the features and functions and how it operates is very different. So if you learn the process of Android, then you try to work on an iPhone, you'll go nuts because it's a completely different feel and functionality. Exactly. I've lived it too.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
annoying. Yeah.
Yep. So, that's to me an example of, we can't learn specific. The old school was you learn steps. You learn, all right, start menu, control functions. Here's what I do to operate a computer. Versus now you have to think dynamically because programs are different. Things will change in the middle of operating. They'll just change a program and a function or a feature, and you have to pivot. So I ask basically technology-wise, how capable somebody is to learn, self-learn, and to be aware as things change, to be dynamic, because change is about the only constant we have. And especially as we start to digitize, that is really important for the sales to succeed, is to be able to use the various programs and learn how to dig in and educate themselves. So use of technology is important. You can get very frustrated very quick. The other thing that has changed, going back to the idea of, I like the word solutions. I worked in the industry for a bit. They love the idea of solutions because you took hardware, software, services, you put all those together and you had a solution for a customer. And you said, here's your package based on your needs. Here's what we propose. And here's how it's all going to work together. So the move industry is not much different. As we talked of, with resources being limited, you have your own branches, your own crews, you have other network supports, but all of those have to work together to create a customer experience, especially a 5-star. So it's up to the salesperson to always be curious, to always understand how things happen, why things happen, and if not, where they can find resources for support. So it's technology and it's curiosity, because it's like sports. You can have a good athlete, but if they're not willing to invest in themselves and progress, what you get them at is their face value, and it doesn't go beyond that. And so when things change, you'll find those people will fall behind. The people that are dynamic, that can go back and push themselves, grow. So I ask about technology, and then I ask the question of, when challenges arise, how do they persevere? So ultimately looking for a solutions-driven person, somebody who can kind of pave their own way for support, versus expecting things to be structured and handed, because our industry is no longer that black and white structure. It's dynamic, and successful people are the dynamic players. They're athletes. They're not key players in one position.
Oh yeah, the thing is, it makes so much sense. So one of the things that, like, it makes complete sense that you focus on people who are able to change quickly and think on their feet, because as you said, it's very dynamic currently in terms of the tools that you use, how you use it. The customers are evolving. Like, the actual customers are now like getting younger people that are super tech savvy, and they're looking for an Amazon experience, so to speak. Like, 1-2 days. Why is my stuff not across the country in 2 days? What are you guys doing? So, yeah. Another thing, one thing that I generally like to ask, depending on if I'm interviewing a sales rep, is, what's the last thing you learned? How did you learn it, and why? Like, it's a 3-component question, and then it gives me like a feel why they learned something, what pushed them to it. So I really like, there's a bunch of other things, but I love that because it tells me more about them as well as a person, and tells me what are their learning habits and how they learn. So that way, as you literally mentioned, is how they can adapt to different situations and scenarios, as this is a very specific position. Like, sales is sales across, most industries, I would say. Just different things that you have to learn in terms of logistics and that kind. So yeah, I enjoy it. And how many people do you hire out of the people that you interview, approximately? I'm curious.
I mean, in sales, we do a heavy vet on the front side. So I make criteria because I'm looking at type person, or so we have an HR team in posts in multiple channels to try to get as much traffic as possible. They will pre-qualify those. So then what we actually interview is filtered and filtered and filtered and filtered. So example, you could have 100 interests, you could have 15 applicants, you interview 3 of those, and you determine one, get offered a one. So, I mean, when you look at that, you say, all right, well, I have 100 applicants to get to one. I only talked to 3 of them because, again, what I wanted filtered down. So there's a lot of filtering on the front side. That is, you said it very well, modern age technology. People can find you. People will find you on the phones. They'll find you on the laptops, computers. So your marketing department, your social medias become your billboards. But then it's the gatekeepers that should hopefully vet and qualify and filter that down, so that then we, managers aren't burdened with 100 phone calls, 100 resumes, and going, well, there's three candidates. I should be focused on my process, my team, and hopefully luckily I have enough support in my company that can do that for me, can qualify a lot of that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I had a painful process. I've interviewed over the last 10 years approximately. I think, and this is now that you said how the process works, it's very painful for me to admit this, but but I have interviewed over 1,000 people over the last 10-ish or so years. I'm not like, it's very like, now I feel like a complete dumbass. Like, why why did I go through all of that? And then, like, painful to
Sure.
admit, but it is what it is. That's why, I learned. Hopefully I learned from my previous mistakes. I won't have that happen again, because it's just, yeah,
Well,
it's painful.
if that breaks out to people a year, so I'll call you in a year and see if you've interviewed less than 100 people, and that's called a win. So.
Well, look, as I'm running my own company right now, I mean, I hope I will interview 100 people. That means that we're doing well, and that we do have a vetting process to get to those 100 people. So I
Correct.
hope, I hope that we get to that number. That'll be awesome stuff for us. But
Sure.
yeah, I mean, I really, really, I love the chat. I really appreciate it, because I mean, there's a bunch of things that we unpacked here, especially in the industry, how the process of a well-run sales organization looks like in a moving company. And I'm super thrilled to have this conversation. So, hopefully this reaches out to a bunch of people and shows what you guys are doing, which is awesome, and why you're able to deliver on that 5-star experience at Mesa. So that way, the customers feel like appreciated and supported throughout the entire journey.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to answer questions and hopefully provide some insight.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, because I was listening to a bunch of answers. I was just smiling, because I really enjoy hearing when someone has everything like broken down specifically, and they know exactly how and what they're talking about. And it's just like, I get happy. Like, I get happy that it's so well done. I really do. So this was Jason from Mesa Moving, the VP of Sales. Now everybody should know how a well-drilled machine looks like. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And yeah, you have any last things to share with the audience?
I appreciate the opportunity to talk. I wish everybody well in their ventures, in their pivots as our industry is growing. Pandemic magnified, I think, what was probably a 10 plus year change and really pushed into a year to 2 year window. It caused a lot of our sales and operations teams to work remote, to realize what work life looks like remote. Provided challenges, but also provided opportunities for the business to start to scale into a remote structure. So I wish everybody well in that. I wish everybody, luck in the challenges of finding capacities to service what the workload looks like. We're lucky in our case that demand is high. But the challenge then becomes capacity. So there's never a free meal. It's just a different one. So, yeah. So thank you for the opportunity.